I can do this. I've done this before. Give me a second. All right. رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Salawat. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat to hasten the master of our time, Sahibul Asri wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I don't know if I can lower this a bit more or if I should move it closer. Here we go. We'll do like this. This should work. One of our goals in these nights of why we hold these majalis is self-development. What I mean by that is, as adults living in a Western educated society, one of the things that we've learned is that progression in life does not end with the age of education. That, for example, as adults and professionals, especially in our contemporary society, we've learned that if, for example, at the age of 22 when I finished my undergraduate degree, or 24 when I finished my master's degree, if I stop the process of learning and continuing my education, my career development generally stalls. In certain professions, for example, the medical profession and pharmaceutical, healthcare, things of that nature, it's mandated that if you want to continue practice in your profession, you have to take CE credits, or continuing education credits, that ensure that you as a member of your profession, of your field, as an individual who is recognized with the characteristic of being associated with this profession, need to continue the process of educating yourself. And that if you should stop this process, you immediately begin the process of taking yourself out of this profession. You lose your licensing, you lose your certification, so on and so forth. That says that I am no longer a practicing member of this profession. In the same sense, the assumption that we make that, for example, I went to madrasa as a child, I learned the basics of my faith, that now I've completed my education and I'm a Muslim, khalas, I'm done, we would say is an incorrect process of the education of a Muslim. And rather, a Muslim is a personality who spends his life in the continuing education of Islam. And our goal in these majalis and our goal in these programs is to continue that process of education. Now, one of the specifics that we have to realize as a community, and we know this, but it's important to reiterate these points in the beginning of any conversation, is that these majalis are not a graduate level course. For example, you can't say, I heard in a majlis and therefore I'm an expert on the issue. What we would rather say is that the majlis of Aba Abdullah is the introduction to ideologies and thought processes and to concepts that then we take the responsibility to go on and further our study and education about. The purpose of these majalis is not to make you an expert in a field, but rather to correct the ideology and the thought process behind the concept, so that when we later want to learn more about it and devote our time to it in our continuing education, we don't get lost in the topic. Rather, we have the guidelines put into place of how to further our growth. So these institutions, these majalis, their functionality is the introduction, is the process of starting these conversations. Sometimes what happens is as we go through a conversation, we feel that in a majlis, we've heard enough about a topic to say we've well-rounded and understood the entire concept. Now, that's a very difficult statement to make. Why? Because there are many things that need to be detailed and explained in their relationship with other concepts and ideologies. But the point is that we get a good perspective of how we want to proceed, and that's why our goal in these majalis is to learn from the example of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You see, when Allah says, مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدٌ أَبَا أَحَدٍ مِّن رَجَالِكُمْ وَلَكِنَّ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَخَاتِمُ النَّبِيِّينَ, that Allah is telling the people that this Muhammad is not one of the parents of your men, and he's not one of your fathers, but rather he is the end of the holy prophethood and the seal of the messengers. The explanation Allah is giving in this and in other verses similar to this is he's talking about the idea that Rasulullah is a human being. He came on this earth and he's going to leave after a period of time. And we know that from the start of his risalat, that period of time was 23 years. And in this 23 years, our Holy Prophet gave us the entirety of the message of Islam. However, how it applies to the variety of situations in the life of humanity is not something that could be encompassed in 23 years. So Allah instituted the position of guidance and the teaching of the message of Islam through the silsila of imamat. And these A'imma alayhimus salam, these imams, became the divinely appointed individuals that took the message of Islam and explained its application and relationship to society over the next period of 250 years. And then we entered the period of ghaibat. Now this is a very lengthy discussion about why this ghaibat happened and what the fundamental behind it was. But our discussion tonight is, and as we talk about the munasabat of the shahadat of our fourth Imam, Ali ibn al-Husayn Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, is to understand that the purpose of these A'imma was to teach us how does the message of Rasulullah apply in the world and the life that we live in. To give us the detailed explanation. No Imam ever brought a rule that was outside of the Shariat of Rasulullah. Meaning anything an Imam has ever done is an explanation already provided. This was the responsibility of the A'imma alayhimus salam. So it's because through the example of the Ahlul Bayt we understand what was the message of Rasulullah. We learn what was the intended purpose that Rasulullah had for us to learn from and establish within our lives, and how we then conduct our lives and our processes according to the message of Rasulullah. So once the message was revealed, once the product was presented, once the program was prepared and released, the instructional videos, the learning manuals, all of these were materials that were provided through the seerah of the A'imma alayhimus salam. Which is why when we want to understand the relationship Islam has to certain concepts, we have to look at the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. Now tomorrow night inshallah we'll have the majlis that discusses and gives an explanation of some of the biography of Imam Zainul Abidin and the important points throughout the life of Imam Zainul Abidin and the significance of this particular Imam amongst all of the A'imma alayhimus salam, and how we should look at the lives of the A'imma. Today, very briefly, I want to have a discussion about how one of the main lessons we learn from Imam Zainul Abidin is the process of handling loss in life. And the main question that sits behind it, is it permissible for us to be sorrowful? Are we allowed to be sad people for the difficulties we face in our life? The significance of this question, why this becomes an important question is many times we have a perspective to say, for example, that because what Allah gave me, Allah took away from me, and it was Allah's to begin with, why do I need to be sad about something? Or that, for example, somebody in our community, when they go through a loss, we have this opinion, bas, it's enough. You've gone through this, leave it alone. Or at other times, the way we want to express our sorrow, how do we express our sorrow? What's the appropriate process of this dealing with sorrow and loss? And one of the lessons from the life of Imam Zainul Abidin is exactly this, how to deal with sorrow. The example that if sorrow impacts your life and if you go through difficulties in life, how do you go about properly processing this or expressing this. Culturally, we have norms and we have expectations. For example, we have norms that at certain times we will cry, we will weep, and then that's it, khalas, we're supposed to be done. And at other times, we actually prevent members of our community that going through the process of loss and discussion of sorrow, because we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how do you process loss. How do you help someone process loss? What are the things that you do? Now again, this isn't a master class in the subject that we're going to address everything from individual loss to the types of loss to, for example, then the appropriate process of it. No, we're going to introduce the concept and the ideology that opens us to the ability to research and learn more about it. So with your lightest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the verse of Quran that we began with, Allah mentions, He says, did mankind think that they would be left alone when they said they have faith and they wouldn't be tested? Surah Al-Ankabut, in the starting of this surah, Allah begins this conversation. He mentions, He says, what did you think? It's sufficient to say you have faith? There would be no challenge to you? There would be no requirement for you to prove that you actually keep Iman? And He continues, and He said, we tested those who came before, and we test you to know who is truthful of the words that they say and who is a liar. The point of these verses Allah is telling you is, what's the purpose of this creation? What are we doing here? This isn't a happy place. This isn't heaven. Nor is it hell. Let's be very clear about that. I'm not making the statement this is hell. Allah is making the agreement with humanity and society that when you make the commitment to me to say you have faith in me, I want to see that faith from you. I want to see you demonstrate how is that faith something that you show and something that you actually perform in your life. And that process of how Allah determines, do you actually have faith? Do you actually have Iman in Allah? Do you actually have yaqeen that Allah is the creator and that Allah will compensate good and bad? Allah Himself tells you in Surah Baqarah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَجُوعٍ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ فَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah tells you, in one verse in Surah Ankabut, He's telling you, hey, the test is coming. That don't imagine that this life is something foolish. If you deserve a reward, you have to demonstrate why you deserve a reward. You have to pass the test. It's not sufficient that you were born and you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, and there you go, you're done. Life is good. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. I will ask for salawat infrequently just to make sure I haven't put anyone to sleep. So it happens. Allah is saying that, okay, fine. You said you have faith, now prove it. How should you prove it? Allah says, I'll tell you how. I'm going to test you. And I'm going to test you with something from fear, from hunger, from loss of wealth, from yourselves and from your children. These are all aspects of life and this worldly environment that Allah is going to test us from. And that it's our responsibility that when we see these losses and we see these conflicts that we have with our environment and society, that we lose something. For example, with fear. Do we have fear, for example, for our safety at times? Do we have fear, for example, for the protection of our wealth and our children? Do we have hunger at times? That, for example, we don't earn enough money to pay our bills? Or that, for example, at some point in time we face a loss in our businesses? We say we did everything right. I was a good businessman. I prepared my material. I prepared my product. I was making money, and all of a sudden something drastic happened and it disappeared. Or, for example, from ourselves. We're moving around healthy and then all of a sudden a sickness befalls us out of nowhere. Congenital defect shows up in our life. Or from our children, from our offspring. Sometimes a man, he's willing to take any test on himself. Do it to me what you want to do. But Allah says, I wanted to see if you have faith, so I'm going to test you from that which is difficult for you. And the test comes in the shape of our children, their health, their sickness, their education, their resources. And Allah tests us to see, who are we? Are we someone who has committed to this ideology? Are we someone who has decided that this is what is good for us or bad for us? The point in mentioning this before we get to the example of Imam Zainul Abidin is to say this. When we take a look at our lives and we look at the difficulties we face in life, what's our perspective upon the difficulty that befalls us? Some people say this is bala. Some people say this is azab. Allah is punishing me. Baba, look back at history. You don't live after Allah punishes you. The people of Thamud, who killed the she-camel of Saleh, did they survive after Allah punished them? Fir'aun, did he survive after Allah's punishment came? The people of Nuh, did they survive? Allah's punishment is, there is nothing that continues. What we experience in our lives is this concept of the test that Allah is seeing. Do you have faith? Do you really believe in me? These difficulties that befall us places, either one, they originate from the consequence of our own actions. That we make decisions and choices in life, and after those decisions, the difficulty we face is the consequence of the decision that we made. Sometimes what happens is we believe that, oh, I made this decision, but I did istighfar, I did tawbah. I did something bad, but I did tawbah, then why am I suffering through this? Allah is punishing me. Let me ask you something. Adam alayhi salam, our grandfather, did he eat from the tree? Do you need more chai? Do we need to take a chai break? Come on. Did Adam eat from the tree? Was there a consequence to that action? Did Adam do tawbah for that action? Was the consequence removed from that action? Thank you very much. Consequence is something that even if Allah accepts your tawbah, doesn't change the reality of existence. When we have, for example, certain difficulties in life, someone, God forbid, develops lung cancer. Says, oh, Allah is punishing me. Baba, what about the cigarettes you've been smoking for the past 30 years? Did you think there's no consequence to this action? That Allah all of a sudden decided to just all of a sudden punish you, Adam? No, these are the consequences of our actions. Even if it came from that action, the consequence remains the same way. I'm driving and I hit something. Na'uzubillah, I don't want to hit anything. I hit something. I get out of my car. I go to, for example, I hit someone's bench in front of their house. I go to this individual and I apologize. Listen, I'm very sorry. It was a moment, my eyes closed for a second. I didn't realize it. I hit your bench. And he says, it's okay. I accept your apology. Oh, that's great. I was really worried about this. Did the bench suddenly become better? No. Is he going to say you don't need to pay me for the bench? No. The consequences of my actions remain the same way. Some of the trials and difficulties that we bring upon ourselves in this life are the exact result of the decisions that we make. Sometimes we understand the decision that we make and we know that it has consequences. Other times we don't. The examples we've been giving are things that we understand the consequences of. You smoke for 30 years, there's a chance you're going to get emphysema. It's a pretty good chance. And we know that. You drive carelessly, you're going to hit something and have to pay the consequences. We know that. But then there are other actions that have consequences that because we don't see them in front of our eyes, we forget about. For example, breaking relations with my family. Qata'i Rahm. Qata'i Rahm is something that has so many difficulties. It decreases your rizq. It decreases your lifespan. It takes good things in your life and makes them difficult for you. All of these are consequences. Relationship. Allah gave me a responsibility. Allah attached me to a person and I decided I know better than Allah and said I don't need this person in my life. So I said, oh, you know better? Okay, then you don't need all these other things that I gave you as well either. Backbiting. Ghibat. It has consequences. My a'mal disappear from me. I lose the barakat that I have in my life. There are pious people, the narrations explain, there are pious people on Yawmul Qiyamah, they will stand there. And when they receive their book, they'll be very happy. And they receive their book and they're happy that Allah is going to reward them. They go before Allah for their reward and the book is empty. Say, Ya Allah, I spent my life in ibadat. I would stay awake at night in Salatul Layl. I would recite Quran every Ramadan. I used to do many khatam of Quran. I would do tasbih like no one else. Where's my reward? And the answer from Allah comes, but you used to backbite people when you did these things. When you went to the masjid, you would discuss the ones who didn't come to the masjid. When you would sit at home with your friends in ibadat, you would turn to each other and say, you saw so-and-so didn't come today, What is he doing at home? You did backbiting of people. and the consequence can't be removed. There's a reaction to it. So we say one of the series of, for example, these tests that we have in this life are those tests that are the result of the consequences of our actions. That there are some things that, for example, we do, and when we make these decisions, there is an effect and an impact that happens to our life, and that impact and effect can't be separated simply by tawbah. It is something that is going to exist, and it's going to continue, and I have to deal with the consequences of my actions. My seeking Allah's pardon will not remove the consequences of my behavior. The second item that we see that comes as a test from Allah is exactly that, a test from Allah that Allah has designated for us that's outside of our control. This kind of a test many times comes in many different formats. For example, sometimes this test comes in the shape of a natural disaster. Sometimes this test comes in the shape of, for example, an accident, an act of humanity, God forbid. And what we say is, for example, that these tests are again in the same process that Allah has said that fine, you can do everything right, but this isn't the place of reward. This is the place of testing. So let me see what you do when you did everything right, and yet still something wrong happened. There's no you didn't do anything wrong. But now the bala befell you, the difficulty befell you. What do you do now? How do you behave? And there's a lengthy debate about how these come and what do we do with these things. When we look at, for example, the 5 categories that Allah has told us, وَلَا نَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَجُوعٍ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَأَنفُسٍ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ, that these 5 categories are generally where Allah says, my test will come to you. Whether it's through fear, and your fear of security and safety that you have in the society you live in, which some of us have. Whether it's through hunger, the inability to satisfy your needs and that there is not sufficiency in your funds. Sometimes it happens, we have millions of dollars and we're still not satisfied, we can't cover our needs. And other times we have less than enough money that anybody else will be satisfied with, yet our needs are fulfilled. It's that satisfaction, it's not simply a large bank account. When you want to ask Allah for rizq, ask Him for sufficiency. Ask Him for satisfaction. It could be you have $5 million in the bank account and still there's no satisfaction in your money. You're still in the search of more. You're still in the need for more. You still can't cover your necessities of life. And other times you don't make $100,000 a year, you make $50,000 a year, but your expenses are covered and you're living a satisfied life. That satisfaction is what we desire. We ask for money, but our desire is satisfaction. So when we ask, we should ask for the right need that we have. From the loss of wealth, from all these processes that we learn. The question is, when we go through these things, how do we respond and react? How do we go through the process of coming to the conclusion of behaving in a way that is correct and appropriate? So the first question is, I went through a loss. Am I allowed to be sorrowful? Is it okay to be upset about this? Or is Allah not okay with us being sad about a loss? Are we allowed to be sad? Is it permissible to be sorrowful? There are many different conversations that many ulama have had to give us an explanation that yes, you're allowed to be sad. When you go through a loss and a difficulty in life, it's permissible within Islam to be sad. And for us, there are many examples to take a look at. Whether you take a look at whether you take a look at in the life of Rasulullah, our Holy Prophet. In the history of our Holy Prophet, he says, I was covered with difficulties and problems in life such that no prophet before me faced as many difficulties. He would say, I have spent 30 days on this earth where I had nothing to eat but leaves because of the difficulties that people put upon me. Our Prophet is the one who had none of his sons live through infancy. Take a look and you see that Ibrahim, his son, that was born to Maria Qubtiya, when his son dies, the hadith is very famous. Oh Ibrahim, our eyes weep for your loss. Before I continue the tradition, it continues, but here we stop. This example is telling us that sorrow is acceptable. When you go through difficulty, to be sad is okay. When we take a look at Nabi Yaqub, did Allah tell him, Yaqub, you should be punished for your weeping? Sorrow is acceptable within Islam. But now look at the continuation of the statement of Rasulullah. O Ibrahim, at your loss the eyes weep tears, but the tongue will not say that which displeases Allah. It's permissible to be sad when you go through a difficulty. The loss of a child is one of the most greatest difficulties a person can have. Which is why that Allah mentions this last when He says the things that I will test you with. The last He says is I will test you with thamarat, with your fruits, with your children. It's a very difficult loss. There's no shame in being sad when you lose a child. It's allowed to be sad about these things. However, there's a process of which through we grieve that's acceptable within Islam, and a process through which we grieve that is unacceptable in Islam. And that's what we want to understand. That's why we see the examples of the Ahlul Bayt going through loss. That's why we are given the example. This Imam of ours, this Ma'soom of ours, to show us you may go through tests in life. You may go through trials in life. You may go through difficulties. Did Imam Zainul Abidin do anything to deserve the trials that he was put under? No. But when he goes through the trials, now he demonstrates, he says, "Oh mu'mineen, look at my example. Look at my example to learn what your character needs to be in the face of adversity. What kind of a person you need to be when you go through loss and difficulties in life." You see, some people come to the opinion, and we'll talk about this tomorrow night, that Imam Zainul Abidin, because of the difficulty he faced in Karbala, he became someone who was incapable, na'uzubillah, of doing anything and accomplish anything. We take a look and we see in our contemporary environment, we see people who, for example, when they lose someone in their life, all of a sudden their personality changes and they lose certain qualities in their personality. They lose the capability that they possessed. But look, Imam himself is describing, he says, "I'm the one who lost 18 members of my family in one day. I'm the one who went through the experience of going through Kufa and Sham with the women of my house. Yet my Imam at no point in time does he desert his prayers. Rather, his title is what? His title is the adornment of the worshippers." Meaning that difficulty and loss, the Imam is teaching, he says, look at my example. I lived over 30 years after the events of Karbala. Is there any hadith or narration out there that says Imam never said his prayers? That Imam skipped a salat for the difficulty he went through? That Imam was not one of the reciters of Quran and one of the lovers of Hajj of Allah? The first lesson we want to take a look at when we look at this example of this personality is that this was a personality who, even though he was sorrowful and mournful for the difficulty that he went through, he never let his sorrow, his trial, his difficulty separate him from what Allah desired him to do. Our difficulties and sorrow, one of the first lessons we should learn is that my sorrow, my difficulty does not separate me from the Khaliq. If it separates me from the Creator, if it separates me from Allah, I fail the test. حَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يَفْتَنُونَ. Do you think you're going to say you have faith and you won't be tested? The bala is the test. The success in the test is demonstrated through the character of the Imam. That you can't go through a difficulty greater than the Imam went through. But the Imam never separated from Salat. He never separated from Allah. He never separated from what Allah commanded him to do and commanded him to be. He ensured that his actions always reflected what Allah wanted regardless of the difficulty he went through. We see ourselves in a state of difficulty. One of the things that we have, for example, sometimes we use profanity. Sometimes we express anger and frustration. Sometimes we close ourselves off from society and we withdraw ourselves from everyone. Sometimes we have other answers and responses. Sometimes it's through physical actions. We want to hit something, we want to break something. All of these expressions, they take away from our ability to be rewarded for these actions. Let's go back to when Allah tells us He's testing us. وَلَا نَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَجُوعٍ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ فَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give glad tidings to those who have sabr, who have patience. Our ideal is that as we go through these difficulties, tests, and challenges in life, and we want to express our sorrow, we should not lose the status of being someone who is patient. That our anger, our frustration, our dealing with this process, our expression of sorrow shouldn't remove the status of one who is patient. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. How are we doing? Are we okay? I haven't put anyone to sleep yet? We're all right? Okay, let me take a look at time too as well. Just give me a second, I'm sorry. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. We've been going for a little while. You guys are all right, right? We're okay? All right. Our Holy Prophet says, الصبر رأس من الإيمان. That patience is the head of faith. If we were to take the concept of Iman and faith and put it as a physical body in front of you, the significance of patience to that body is the significance of a head to the body. If you remove the head, you're not looking at a person anymore, are you? If you remove the head, this guy's not walking out of here himself, is he? In the same concept, to be someone who is a faithful person, you need to have patience. You need to be patient through these processes, otherwise your faith has no value. So the question is, what is patience? What is patience? For example, some people are of the opinion that patience is a passive event. Patience is just sitting and waiting. Patience is resigning yourself to what happens in life. For example, patience is, okay, fine, someone hit my car. Oh, poor me. Okay. Baba, what happened? I'm being patient. The assumption is that patience is being passive in the face of adversity. That's when something happens to me, my lack of reaction is patience. This is wrong. Because faith is not something that's passive. Faith does not want you to sit still and wait there and to be non-reactive to environment. It's not what faith does. When Allah tells us, for example, "Asta'inu bis-sabri was-salat," seek refuge, seek comfort through patience and prayer. What? Seek comfort through the idea of sitting there and saying, "Oh, okay." Resign yourself to the conclusion. Okay. No. Patience, like anything that exists within Islam, has fundamentals and has a philosophy behind it. There's a way to operate with patience. The same way, salat is not simply me standing and saying, "I'm praying." Like, "Oh, what do you mean you're praying?" The prayer has actions associated with it. Prayer has a behavior associated with it. Prayer has a preparation associated with it. Prayer has all of these things that you do before salat, during salat, and after salat that reflect the presence of prayer in your life. If Allah is telling you to seek comfort in difficulty through patience and prayer has a system and an activity associated, then certainly patience within itself has to be greater than simply being silent in the face of adversity. So how do we know what is patience? Now, as with any concept, we can look at a concept from a perspective and see an aspect of it. So for example, when I give you an explanation of the ideology of how to practice patience, it doesn't mean this is the only way to practice patience. But rather this is a perspective the ulama have prepared to help us introduce ourselves to patience. But the door of patience and what's included in it is much wider and broader than simply the description I'm going to give you. But for the goal, right, the idea is when you come to these majalis, you take something with you, right? Continuing education, continuing this process of learning about Islam implies that when I leave and I want to make something practical of myself, I need to have a way of application. For me to tell you that, okay, fine, buddy, yes, it's okay, be sad, everybody cry. No, how do we get past it? And that's where the description comes. The same way that every ideology and every concept has a foundation on which it stands, one interpretation and explanation of how to understand patience we give with the explanation of two foundations and two pillars of it. That the two legs upon which patience stands. The first of those legs is to have trust in God. Having trust in God is not something that, for example, okay, did this happen to you? Did you lose your car? Yes. Are you happy about it? No. Why would I be happy about it? This isn't trust in God. Trust in God is to know that whatever happens to me is compensated by Allah. That anything I go through in life, Allah will not leave it uncompensated. That anything that happens to me has khair in it. It's a very difficult concept sometimes. For example, I'm walking around and I get hit by lightning. And someone comes to you and says, "Buddy, yes, you got hit by lightning, huh?" And you say, "Yeah." "Are you happy about it?" "What, do you think I'm crazy I'm happy about it?" No, this idea that I have yaqeen in Allah and that everything is compensated by Allah, that my goal in life is the fulfillment of whatever Allah gives me, is this aspect of having trust in God. Which is the first part. When I go through difficulty, I may enter a state of sorrow, but it shouldn't be a state of self-pity. This isn't trust in God. Trust in God is that anything that occurs to me happens, that Allah will compensate me for it, and Allah is aware of it, and Allah gives me what is best for me. Look at the statement of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridan biqada'ihi wa tasliman li amrih. That certainly we came from Allah, and to Him is our return. This is a temporary abode. This is a place I'm for a little while. This isn't something that's lengthy for me. I am satisfied with what Allah has decreed for me, and I submit myself to His command. This is the example of having yaqeen in Allah and trust in Allah. That's when I go through difficulty, my patience is reflected, that should someone come and ask me about something and say, "Oh, poor you, huh?" No, not poor me, it's okay. I'm satisfied with the decree of Allah. This is a part of my patience. When I want to be patient in the face of difficulty, rather than sitting there and kicking myself, what could I have done differently? What could I have done that would have changed this future for me? If only I had left my house 5 minutes later. If only I had, maybe if I would have, then this would not have happened. This isn't trusting Allah. This is where our sixth Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam makes the statement. He says the mu'min is the one who realizes that anything he receives could never have missed him, and anything that missed him could not have hit him. That whatever reaches you from either the bounties that Allah provides or the tests that Allah provides, Allah has written it for you and it is ordained for you in such a way that there was no way that you would not have gotten it. And if you got it, there's no way you could have avoided it. Which is why the first part and the pillar that we want to have when we want to be patient in our trials and tribulations of life is that we acknowledge that I have trust in Allah and what Allah dictates for me. There's no way this would have missed me. Look at the life of Imam Zainul Abidin. Did he ever complain to Allah, why us? Why me? Why did it have to happen to me? Why did it have to be my family? Why couldn't it have been Ahmad next to me? The Imam never makes this statement. The Imam teaches from the example. The Imam never complained that why did Allah do this to us? Rather, you see the Imam when he stands in the court of Yazid and Yazid asks him, "What is your name?" He says, "I am Ali ibn al-Hussein." What does Yazid say? He says, "Did not Allah kill Ali ibn al-Hussein?" Imam Zain al-Abidin replies, "No, the people killed my brother Ali. And I tell you, my father loved the name Ali so much that had he had as many sons as existed, they all would have been Ali." Does the Imam complain? Does the Imam accuse Allah of anything? He has yaqeen and certainty that even if they are seeing this most difficult of times. Remember, this is the court of Sham. When Imam Zainul Abidin was asked, "What was the most difficult thing that you went through?" 3 times my madhloom Imam replied, "Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham." But he doesn't complain. He trusts Allah. The second part of patience, the second leg on which patience stands, is having perspective in your desires of this life. The fulfillment of desires and understanding it. You see, much of the conflict we have in our life is associated with something that we desire and we lose. Something that we want and we lose. And it's always material. Sometimes it's the job that we wanted and we lost it. Sometimes it's an object that we wanted, we lost it. Sometimes even it's our children or our family. And we become frustrated and upset about losing it. These items is a material frustration, is a frustration about this world. Our desires are focused only on the physical aspects of the world that we exist in. To control this and to bring us back to the aspect of being satisfied with Allah, what Allah decrees with us, is the understanding that stop focusing on your material desires and focus on your spiritual desires. Do I have a desire to pray Salat al-Layl? Do I have a desire to spend my time in the worship with Allah? Do I have a desire to be satisfied in the actions that Allah loves to see me perform? When my desires shift from something physical to something spiritual, when my desires shift from something that I can possess and obtain or that is reflected in my physical presence to something that Allah is aware of, when I lose material, when I lose physical possession, it doesn't bother me as much. My satisfaction doesn't go away. My frustration doesn't come. The point to say is that when we shift our personality to stop focusing on all the things that I want or the material items and start focusing on what it is that I am as an individual, what is my spirituality, what is my behavior, what is my character, what is it that Allah wants me to do with this life, the physical frustrations that I have, they don't bother me as much. I lost my job, but at least I can pray. I communicate